Good morning. Let's try that again. Good morning.
Good morning.
There you go. I'm pleased to be here once again to present the 2011 State of the City. And let's give the Chamber one more time a hand for organizing this event. As I start my second year as mayor, I've discovered that despite the complexity of some of our community problems, our businesses, residents, and community organizations remain as engaged as ever. After personally witnessing over 500 volunteers sign up to participate in the Common Ground Homeless Survey throughout Santa Barbara County, requiring them to work before dawn on 3 mornings, I'm filled with optimism and resolve to tackle the problems ahead of us. In November, I was equally impressed when 46 people of diverse backgrounds and interests threw their hats into the ring to fill a vacancy on the City Council. So let me introduce you to this year's City Council. First, our newest council member, selected from 46 potential candidates, Council Member Randy Rouse. He joins Mayor Pro Tem Bendy White, Councilmember Dale Francisco, Councilmember Grant House, Councilmember Frank Hotchkiss, and Councilmember Michael Self. Also with us this morning is our executive management team, so please stand as I call your names. City Administrator Jim Armstrong, City Attorney Steve Wiley, Assistant City Administrators Marcelo Lopez and Paul Casey, Airport Director Karen Ramsdell, Waterfront Director John Bridley, Police Chief Cam Sanchez, Park and Recreation Director Nancy Rapp, Library Director Irene Macias, Public Works Director Christine Anderson, Fire Chief Andy DeMizio, and our new Finance Director Bob Samario. The local media likes to remind us all that today's City Council is philosophically more diverse than it has been in past years. And yet, this past year, we've accomplished many results, much with a unanimous vote. While we may be described by the press, blogs, and community conversations in general as a microcosm of what we see in divisive partisan politics nationally, I say we're better than that. With each City Council meeting, I find that we're able to overcome emotions, focus on facts, and address the substance of each issue. As your elected leaders, civility begins with us. We are in a unique position to set the tone in public discourse and lead by example by our words and deeds. This is an issue in every city. Following the tragic events in Tucson in January, I had the distinct honor to meet Tucson Mayor Bob Walkup and hear his firsthand account of the terrible shootings there during a U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting. At that meeting, I joined Mayor Walkup and hundreds of other mayors to sign a civility accord that speaks to the following principles: respecting our right to hold different opinions and to understand different perspectives, choosing our words carefully, speaking truthfully without accusation and distortion, and finally, taking action against violence and prejudice. Every Tuesday, I'm honored to work with my colleagues who demonstrate the kind of personal qualities that contribute to a civil discussion: gratitude, humility, openness, a sense of duty, a passion to service to others, and a commitment to doing what's right. And while there have been a number of respectful discussions and disagreements, our City Council has accomplished many positive things in the past year. We unanimously adopted a balanced budget that addressed a $9 million deficit in the general fund. We preserved essential recreation and after-school activities, especially for at-risk youth. We kept every fire station open and avoided closing the sobering center. We even restored funding to hire 4 police officers. At the end of the day, our employees were the heroes because they voluntarily covered half of the budget gap through salary and benefit concessions, thus maintaining the quality of city programs and services. And that was just this past fiscal year. If we go back further, you will notice that today's city government is smaller and more efficient. Due to our proactive approach, the City of Santa Barbara is better positioned to deal with the challenges ahead, financial and otherwise. Many of our recent challenges are tied to the economic downturn. The good news is that the worst appears to be behind us. With some improvement in local revenues, Santa Barbara is staying focused on our core programs and services: public safety, streets, sidewalks and infrastructure, parks, libraries, and other community facilities. Despite the recession, the city is hard at work, and as you'll soon see, managing record levels of construction activity. Next year alone, we expect that the city's construction work will value up to $90 million. Much of this construction is planned for large capital projects where we've been successful in leveraging city funds to secure outside financing, funding, and low-interest loans. We estimate that this infusion of dollars will create or maintain hundreds of jobs in the private sector. We've also been able to take advantage of a low-bid environment to stretch the value of each dollar. Since Santa Barbara has projects in every corner of the city, for this year's event, I thought we'd take a virtual tour so you can see for yourself today's investments that make for a stronger city tomorrow. We'll start at one of the city's favorite scenic spots, Shoreline Park. At Shoreline Park, you may remember that part of the bluff disappeared with a major storm a few years ago. Thanks to a state coastal resources grant, we nearly finished with the design of park improvements. And the park will involve replacing the fencing and walkways, installing new lights, landscaping and benches, and replacing the interpretive signage along the walkway. In the sensitive coastal zone, our plan is to begin construction in spring of 2012. From Shoreline Park, you can take in the calm and beauty of the ocean. Yet only a few weeks ago, we cautiously watched and prepared for the impact of a tsunami in Japan that sent tidal surges throughout the California coastline. We learned how vulnerable we can be. And fortunately, we did not see the type of damage that other West Coast communities endured. Yet this was an excellent reminder for us to be prepared for a disaster, when a disaster strikes, whether that epicenter is here or 5,000 miles away. Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with those in Japan after this tremendous disaster. The city of Santa Barbara has a sister city in Japan, Toba, which is located south of Tokyo. While their main economic resources of oyster farms and seaweed farms were completely destroyed by the tsunami, we heard from Toba's mayor that the people there are safe. I'm working with our Sister City Committee to help plan a fundraiser for them on April 28th. Please visit the booth in the lobby for more information. Walking down from Shoreline Park, we get to the Santa Barbara Harbor. At the harbor, we've just completed the first year of construction to replace our 30-year-old marinas. With funds from the California Department of Boating and Waterways, we completed the first phase of improvements to Marina 1, the largest marina in the harbor. We're now working on the next set of docks, and we're replacing 2 docks a year, and the plan is to finish all the docks in 10 years. We know that Santa Barbara Harbor also serves us well in an emergency with the Coast Guard as one of its tenants. Last spring, we witnessed another major disaster, this one a massive oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, one that surpassed Santa Barbara's famous 1969 oil spill that spawned the nation's modern environmental movement. In June, I had the opportunity to see firsthand the large-scale response needed to stop a massive oil leak and clean up coastal waters in the Gulf of Mexico. Along with 36 other mayors, I learned about the difficulties in and importance of local agencies to coordinate cleanup efforts and communications with state and federal regulatory agencies in order to avoid further destruction. We met Coast Guard Captain Roger LaFieri, one of 4 incident commanders, and he was in charge of the oil response and cleanup efforts for the entire state of Louisiana. Through that introduction, I invited him to visit Santa Barbara and lead a workshop for our staff, which he did in October. At this training, City Fire, Police, and Harbor Patrol, the County Office of Emergency Services, Energy, Fire, and Sheriff's Departments, Marine Sanctuary, Clean Seas, and our local Coast Guard and Fish and Game offices learned from his experience containing and cleaning up an oil spill, protecting marine life, and assisting local businesses with recovery. Everyone left with a better understanding of our risks and learned what's involved in mobilizing a community response. So let's continue on our tour. From the harbor, you now have an uninterrupted pedestrian path to Stearns Wharf with the completion of the West Beach Pedestrian Improvement Project. New plaza areas and public art on the sidewalks create a promenade feel all along Cabrillo Boulevard. And this welcoming walk will assist the many new visitors we will see from hosting 7 cruise ship visits, starting with 2 visits in April. and resulting in a boon to the local economy with thousands of passengers and crew coming downtown to shops, museums, and eateries for the day. Passengers from Crystal Symphony and the Sapphire Princess will visit throughout the warmer months. The cruise industry reports an average couple spends $200 per port. And the Conference and Visitors Bureau will be developing a campaign to encourage passengers to return to Santa Barbara and further our reputation as an international travel destination. As we walk along Cabrillo Boulevard, we'll see steady improvements to different segments of the beachside sidewalks all the way to Milpas Street. And our final phase is replacing the sidewalks and adding pedestrian amenities from Milpas Street to the Cabrillo Arts Center. Let's stop at the Dolphin Fountain at Stearns Wharf, a great place for us to see how Santa Barbara's creeks and waterways connect to the Pacific Ocean. Clean beaches and creeks are vital to the natural beauty that draws visitors to our community and provides recreation and enjoyment for our residents. Our staff is known throughout the state for using cutting-edge techniques to identify pollution sources to reach a goal of clean waterways. Our first video will introduce some of our most recent hires that have the right nose for the job.
We have trained a couple of canines to sniff out environmental contaminants, right now specifically in stormwater. Their targets are human sewage and also detergents in the stormwater system, not just in the enclosed system, but also in the open channels.
The light bulb went off for us that if we had real-time results, we could really hone in on these problems a lot easier.
So Creek staff, along with the researchers, got a grant from the Water Environment Research Foundation to test the accuracy and effectiveness of these sewage-sniffing super sleuths.
We're going to some sites that we've tested before, so we know where we should see a positive response from the dogs or a negative response from the dogs. That helps us know how to use the method when we then go to places that we haven't tested before.
To get an idea of why dogs are so well suited for this work, consider this. The area of scent receptors in a human nose is roughly the size of a postage stamp. For dogs like Sable and Logan, it's the size of a Kleenex tissue.
I always use the beef stew analogy. If you walk into a house and somebody's making beef stew, you might recognize the smell of beef stew. But the dog walks into the room and they can pick out every single ingredient separately and define that within their brain as a recognized smell. And that's really the key to their success in doing this.
The dogs are trained to signal their handler when they detect sewage. For Sable, the signal is a bark. Logan sits down.
Generally what will happen is whoever the client is will have some idea of where they would like us to go and investigate. Depending on if it's an enclosed storm sewer system, we just open up the manholes or the sewer grates and just have the dogs smell from the surface. They don't go into any confined space areas.
If neither dog gives the signal of a positive detection, they move on to the next location. Total testing time, including travel, is minutes compared to days or weeks for the other important but more expensive testing methods.
This past year, we've implemented a significant number of improvements to our sewer system to reduce sewage spills, and we've seen exceptional results. In the past 6 months, we've had 3 small spills that were cleaned up before making it to a creek or the ocean. We have 270 miles of wastewater collection pipes throughout the city, and a quarter of the system has been replaced with modern plastic pipes over the last 20 years. And this number will continue to grow each year. We've also steadily increased the collection of debris to prevent it from entering creeks. Thanks to a federal grant, just about every storm drain will have a catch basin screen installed to prevent debris from entering waterways. Overall, we're seeing fewer water quality incidents that result in a public beach closure. In fact, there were no beach closures in 2010. We can credit a variety of efforts here: creek cleanups, finding and eliminating illegal sewer connections, installing storm drain screens, treating stormwater, and fixing broken sewer laterals. This last effort has often involved replacing sewer laterals in private homes. We created financial incentive programs years ago, and since then over 1,000 homeowners replaced their private sewer laterals, preventing sewage spills. So thank you for doing your part. You're cleaning up after your pets, using less toxic pesticides on your lawn, and taking oil, paint, and antifreeze and medications to the proper location so they don't get carried to the ocean. The next generation is well trained also. If you don't believe me, ask your kids where the stormwater goes, and they might surprise you with the knowledge of storm drains. They'll tell you it all flows to the ocean. As we look from the Dolphin Fountain, we see the mouth of Mission Creek. The Mission Creek Flood Control Project has been literally decades in the making, and fortunately, we're seeing significant progress. Working closely with the County Flood Control District and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, this project involves widening over a mile of creek channel to reduce flooding and potential property damage during storm events. After years of planning and design work, this project will begin construction this summer, and we're now actively lobbying for additional federal funds for additional construction. A key part of the effort is the replacement of 6 bridges along Mission Creek to improve water flow and seismic safety and meet today's standards for vehicles and pedestrians. As we move up the creek, you'll see that construction will begin on the Cabrillo Boulevard Bridge later this year. The Chapala, Coda, and Mason Street bridges will follow. The Haley and De La Vina Bridge project and intersection improvements will be finished by this summer and will also include new street lighting on Haley Street. Work on the Ortega Street Bridge to start in May. I do want to take this opportunity to thank the local residents and businesses in the Haley-De La Vina Street area for their patience during this 18-month construction period. From Mission Creek to State Street and downtown. First, what's now become an annual update on the private project on Lower State Street known as La Entrada. We actually have some exciting news to share in that a new development company has acquired the La Entrada project free of debt. The new owner, Michael Rosenfeld, is also the man behind the famed Century Plaza Hotel in Los Angeles. The city granted a 2-year extension for them to pull together financing and build a 114-room luxury hotel, 9 vacation units, and 21,000 square feet of retail space. The project will be designed with open plazas, paseos, and gardens, all in the Spanish colonial revival style. In the meantime, the new owner has agreed to repaint the Californian hotel, install additional landscaping, and improve the site's appearance from the street. Moving up State Street, you may have noticed that the Ortega parking garage has closed since February. Once we finish seismic upgrades, it will reopen next month, and similar work will begin at the Lobero garage. We estimate that the repair work in both lots will be finished before summer. Across the street from the Lobero parking garage, the historic Carrillo Recreation Center has reopened after a year of seismic safety and ADA improvements. Adult and youth recreation classes are now in full swing. Look for a grand opening celebration this summer. 2 years ago, we finished seismic renovations in Fire Station 1 and built a new emergency operations center. We're now ready to move forward with the final phase of renovating the nearby muffler shop on Chapala Street for the administrative offices this spring, and will result in $200,000 of annual savings from temporary lease space. Overall, we've ensured that many of our downtown facilities were designed or upgraded with seismic safety in mind. Fire Station 1, the Carrillo Rec Center, our downtown parking garages. These community buildings are designed to withstand an earthquake, and after seeing some of the recent damage in Japan and New Zealand, we know that we're smart to get ahead of this and be prepared for when an earthquake strikes. Even the massive seismic retrofit of Cottage Hospital is well underway, with medical facilities opening next year and construction of the full campus coming to an end within 5 years. Unfortunately, we still have a major critical facility that's not ready for an earthquake, and that is our police headquarters on Figueroa Street. We've known for several years that the building lacked adequate workspace, and I'm sure you recall stories about police officers working out of former jail cells. As our community's headquarters for police operations, investigations, and dispatch, we've learned that the building has significant seismic flaws on top of a growing list of building concerns that range from not meeting ADA standards to electrical and HVAC systems that don't function properly. We've seen estimates in the range of $25 to $54 million to do a full renovation. That's a lot of parking tickets. This year, Council will need to decide on a best course of action and, depending on the project scope, how to fund it. It's important to note that simply finding a new commercial property will not necessarily work for a new police headquarters, especially with the requirements for a holding cell, enhanced security measures, and the dispatch center. The last project being planned downtown is the remodel of the Central Library. The Junior League and Friends of the Library are leading the charge to give this important community building a facelift. Used by thousands of local families each year, the current well-loved children's library is sorely in need of more space, computers, seating, and shelving. The Children's Library renovation is the first piece of a new library master plan that will adapt the historic building to 21st century demands and a growing number of library patrons. As a separate project, the plaza area will also be enhanced to improve public safety and increase community use. With the exception of the library remodel, all the other downtown projects I've discussed have one thing in common. They were funded by the city's redevelopment agency, now a funding source that's likely to be phased out as part of this proposed state budget. As our tour has taken us from the waterfront and into the downtown area, it's appropriate here to discuss a complex issue we all face: homelessness. Homelessness and how it affects people, our businesses, and community has been part of Santa Barbara for decades. For many years, we've struggled with how to best get people off the streets and stop illegal behavior that occurs among some homeless individuals, such as aggressive panhandling. We want our public spaces to be inviting and welcoming to residents and visitors, and must balance enforcement tools with constitutional free speech laws. Even when people are cited for violating such laws, such as for aggressive panhandling or having an open alcohol container, these violations are frequently thrown out in court. For some cases, the penalty does include jail time, but with jail overcrowding, people are released early. Complicating things further are the economic downturn and continued budget cuts toward mental health and other social services. While it may be frustrating, it's important to remember that it's not illegal to be homeless and sit on a bench. The challenge is on us to coordinate our efforts and implement innovative solutions. In concert with other public agencies and nonprofits, our process has shifted from managing homeless to solving the problem, which we'll now see in this video.
Two recent efforts to address homelessness undertaken by the city and the community are showing positive results.
So, you got nothing but tea in here today?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're willing to go into the detox program?
Yes, sir.
Restorative policing is best explained by the department's approach to people that are chronic problems, nuisance problems. Typically what we find are people that are homeless or soon to be homeless are trapped in a reoccurring state of either mental illness and or drug dependency. And we get called when they're involved in some nuisance-related problem resulting in negative police contact. As a result, they just keep entering the system, going in, getting incarcerated. Eventually, they're back out on the streets.
The police department establishes personal contact with these people with the goal of breaking the cycle of citation, incarceration, and addiction.
I think we're building credibility with the people on the streets. We're building alliances with other care providers and people that we can draw from for their expertise. Ultimately, the idea is to get them back on track, to get them into a care facility to address their personal needs.
Officer Keld Hove is assigned to the restorative policing program and is out on State Street and in the Milpas area on a daily basis.
None of these people really prefer to be living like that. There are just so many things that have gone wrong along the way, so many missteps, so many wrong turns, that it's difficult for them to unravel it. But when you get into the conversation and it's in the inevitable that you are going to jail for that violation at the time, the options on what can we do so we don't go back to this again tomorrow, the next day, and so on, is what comes up. And then we'll make the plans. So I'll pick them up the next day at jail. If they get extended jail times, I'll come meet them in jail, I'll talk to them in jail, and I'll line up programs for them. Programs could be reunification with family. It could be going back to a place that you have better success. Maybe you've been in a program somewhere else before. It could be the local detox center first, so that you can prepare yourself to go out and take on these bigger things.
In the first year of the restorative policing program, the police department had 75 successes, and in the second year, well over 200 in getting people help and off the street.
It does reduce our calls for service because we're talking about the people that are 10% of the people we deal with are 90% of the problem. They draw the biggest draw on our community. They take up ambulance services, they take up first responder services, they take up beds at jail that need to be made for, other types of crimes. So when we can address these people, it does have a significant positive effect on services for the community.
Another effort underway is called Common Ground Santa Barbara, a collaborative effort of the nonprofit, government, business, and faith communities. Over 500 volunteers surveyed people experiencing homelessness to get accurate data as to how many are on the streets and who is at the greatest risk.
Well, the survey is about getting data on those that are homeless in our community and asking really important questions, pertinent questions that a lot of us have been asking. You know, where they came from, what brought them here in the first place, and then what physical and medical conditions they're suffering from out on the streets, and to get them the resources such as housing and supportive services.
Volunteers showed up for 3 consecutive days at 4 a.m. to meet their team members and head out onto the streets to contact as many homeless as possible.
I think a lot of the people were excited to meet with us. We actually had one man flag us down and say, "Hey, are you looking for me? Do you want to talk to me?" And we treat them like people, getting to know them. It's not just an interview, it's a conversation. A lot of the people just really appreciated someone to talk to instead of being looked over or being passed. I hope we break down the stereotypes. I hope we see them as humans and that we see their needs as they're able to be met.
No other community, not San Diego, not Phoenix, not any of these other communities throughout the nation have built that volunteer core base of that many people to go out and do the survey. And I think that goes to show that people really do care in this community about the issue and about solving the issue.
I think we've made a lot of progress, and the Chamber, downtown organization, businesses, faith-based groups, shelters, and nonprofit community have been with us every step of the way. So I want to commend them for their perseverance. Here's some other examples on our progress. The City of Santa Barbara now has an ordinance that bans aggressive panhandling in the downtown core, lower Milpas, and waterfront areas. Chronic violations for aggressive panhandling and open alcohol containers are now prosecuted as misdemeanors rather than infractions. We've increased the number of tactical patrol officers in targeted areas and improved communication between police officers and street outreach workers. We're working closely with community partners to assist people before they lose their home to prevent them from falling into homelessness. 2 years ago, we received a $1.2 million in federal funding for homeless prevention and rapid rehousing, and to date, this program alone prevented 124 very low-income households from slipping into homelessness and helped 208 homeless people obtain housing. Given the hard times we're in, I think this is an impressive number for the city and all human service agencies with a mission to reduce homelessness. Earlier this month, the Council approved a grant to the Housing Authority to purchase a site for a new substance abuse recovery center. This new site will allow the current detox beds to move out of Casa Esperanza, thus assisting the emergency shelter in their daily operations and improve neighborhood concerns in the lower Milpas corridor. We built a new chain-link fence at the Cabrillo Ball Field and saw a quick drop in illegal camping, loitering, and drug activity. We're also studying how free meals are distributed citywide to reduce potential negative neighborhood impacts that can arise from this activity. We continue to work with the City Housing Authority to identify projects to help people become self-sufficient. Last year, you may remember we focused on El Carrillo and learned about 3 Santa Barbara residents who spent decades on the local streets who are now productive members of our community. The next example we'll see is Artisan Court on East Coda Street. Completed this week, the project provides 55 units of housing for formerly homeless people, low-income downtown workers, and youth transitioning out of the foster care system. All of these efforts are hoped to relieve impacts throughout the city. I'd like to now invite City Administrator Jim Armstrong to the podium to give you a more detailed account of the city's financial condition. Jim.
Well, thank you, Mayor Schneider. As our tour moves to City Hall, I'd like to spend a little time talking about the financial issues facing our city. As you know, the past 3 years have been the most difficult facing local government and the state of California and throughout our nation. The deepest recession since the 1930s has hammered our major revenue sources, while demands for services have continued to increase as people depend on government not only for basic services, but also for leisure and cultural enrichment. The most significant impact on city finances has been in the city's general fund, which finances traditional government services such as police, fire, parks and recreation, libraries, and community development. During the period from 2008 to 2010, we saw an unprecedented reduction in sales tax, which fell by nearly 20%. That represents a decline of $4 million in our $100 million general fund. We also saw a similar decline in the taxes we levy on hotel visitors, which dropped nearly 15% from 2008, representing a decrease of $2 million a year. Almost all our other revenue sources have been impacted by the recession, including property taxes, building permits, recreation program fees, and parking ticket payments. Yes, when the economy is down, people pay their parking tickets quicker and they obey the law. I am proud of the way in which the City Council and management have responded to this economic meltdown. When the recession first became apparent in 2008, we implemented a number of important actions. These including cutting back severely on capital improvement projects funded in the general fund, cutting out unnecessary expenditures, and implementing a modifying hiring freeze. Over the past 3 years, we have reduced the size of the city organization by 70 positions. We now have the same number of employees we had 12 years ago. These cuts were heavily focused in administrative departments, such as administrative services and finance, in community development, and in parks and recreation and library services. Since public safety makes up nearly 50% of our general fund budget, it was also necessary to make some cuts in both police and fire. But as you can see, these departments were impacted much less by these than the other functions. We also began negotiating with our 7 employee unions to seek wage and benefit concessions in order to further bring expenditures into balance. Salaries and benefits total 80% of our general fund, and it's critical that we bring these costs under control. As a result, over the past 3 years, we have generated $7 million in savings in our general fund through unpaid furloughs, benefit reductions, and requiring police and fire personnel to contribute towards the retirement cost as other labor groups do. These concessions involve every employee in the organization, from custodians to senior management. Management has led by example, taking the largest cuts both from a percentage standpoint and from a dollar standpoint. Through these efforts, we ended last fiscal year in the black without the use of reserves. We also expect to end this year with a very small surplus. For those of you who monitor city finances closely, general fund reserves as of June 30, 2010 totaled $18.2 million, or approximately 18% of our general fund. Although our goal is to have reserves at a 25% level, this level of reserves is still very healthy for a municipality the size of Santa Barbara. So what does next fiscal year look like? The good news is we're starting to see most taxes recover from the recession. Progress is slow, but at least it's positive. The brightest star has been a significant increase in hotel tax revenues, which are up 10% through the first 7 months of this fiscal year. We are still below 2007 levels, but it's certainly positive progress. Likewise, retail sales taxes have started to recover. We saw a 3.9% increase in the quarter that ended September 30th, and in the Christmas quarter, we improved by 2.7%. On a more modest scale, the county is projecting that property taxes will rise next year by 1%. But on the negative side, we are facing significant cost increases next fiscal year for health care and especially pension costs. As you can see on the chart, our police and fire retirement costs next year will rise from 36% to nearly 43% of payroll. That means that for every dollar we pay to these employees in salary, we will be sending 43 cents to the public employee retirement system. By 2014, the amount will increase to 53%. For our non-safety employees, the percentage of payroll rises from 20 to 22% next year, with additional increases in the following years. In total, we expect the amount we pay to PERS out of our general fund to rise from $15 million this year to nearly $21 million in 2014. While we're still finalizing the numbers, our estimated gap for next fiscal year in the general fund is on the order of about $2.9 million. That gap takes into consideration the concession agreements we reached last year with our police and fire unions. However, it does not include any concessions yet from our general employees who are represented by SEIU and our supervisors union. We are currently in active negotiations with both of these groups and will be seeking concessions for the third year in a row. This should narrow the gap considerably, and I am hopeful that I'll be able to present the City Council a balanced budget next month for fiscal year 2012. Before I move on to a couple long-term issues, I want to briefly comment on the financial condition of our major enterprise operations. These include the airport, the waterfront, our two major utilities, water and wastewater, and downtown parking. All of these operations have been impacted to a certain degree by the recession. When revenues began to decline, the enterprise operations responded quickly and made the necessary mid-course corrections. Despite the economy, the enterprise functions have continued to invest heavily in maintaining their physical plant. They have all been able to take advantage of a very favorable bidding environment. All of the major enterprise operants have substantial cash reserves and are in good shape for the future. Now I'd like to focus on two long-term critical issues that we'll need to tackle in the next few years. The first issue is planning for the eventual end of the city's redevelopment agency. As Mayor Schneider noted, redevelopment funding has been a critical tool in the development of downtown, serving as the catalyst for Paseo Nuevo, which is one of the state's most successful downtown shopping malls. Redevelopment has also financed the construction of several of our major parking structures, improvements to the waterfront, and the renovation of both the Carrillo Recreation Center and the Fire Headquarters building on Carrillo. Even if the governor is unsuccessful in his current efforts to eliminate redevelopment next fiscal year, we will need to begin planning for the eventual end of our project area, which is slated to terminate in 2015. In order for downtown to maintain its attractiveness and vitality, we will need to find alternative funding to maintain the very expensive infrastructure that exists today. As I mentioned earlier, we are facing huge increases in the amounts of money we pay to PERS for the cost of employee pensions. This is not surprising due to the major investment losses PERS incurred in 2008 and 2009 and the generous benefit structure that PERS provides to our employees. Under current law, any changes to either the benefit structure or employee contributions will need to be a part of negotiations with our employee unions. Among the issues we'll need to address at the bargaining table are the following. First, we will need to look at the creation of a two-tier retirement system in which new employees will be enrolled in a program with either lower benefits or possibly switching to a defined contribution plan, similar to 401k plans. Secondly, we'll need to look at the current formulas that calculate an employee's retirement benefits based upon their highest year of compensation. Most agencies are now switching to systems that use the average of their highest 3 years. And lastly, we will need to increase the amount of money employees contribute towards their own retirement. Most of this burden is currently borne by the city. As I talk with our employees, it's become evident to me that many of them understand that changes need to be made in this system. But I also know that making meaningful changes will require some very difficult negotiations with our labor unions in the years ahead. Before I conclude my remarks, I want to commend the department heads and key management staff who have worked with me over the past few years to help us navigate through these difficult times. They care deeply about our community and have done a tremendous job in leading the organization to become leaner and more efficient. I also want to thank all of the city employees who day in and day out serve our community. I know it's become fashionable lately to bash public employees in the media, but I want you to know I'm very proud of the caliber of the individuals who work for our city. They are talented, committed, and over the past few years have done extraordinary work to maintain services through cutbacks, furloughs, and wage cuts. As we debate issues such as retirement benefits and collective bargaining rights, I hope we can concentrate on the systems that we hope to change rather than demonize individual employees. In the long run, we need to attract and retain the best and the brightest in the public sector. And part of the way we do that is to honor their service, even if we need to reduce their pay and benefits. Now I'd like to turn the podium back to Mayor Schneider.
Thank you, Jim. Before we leave City Hall, I want to point out one last area I'm proud of. At your places, you each have a copy of the city's Sustainability Achievement Report. We've accomplished some significant milestones that saved a lot of money in the process. Emissions from city facilities are 11% lower than in 1990. Thanks to lighting and HVAC upgrades finished last year, we'll save $150,000 a year going forward. And we're seeing the benefits of green business practices all over town. There are now 16 certified green businesses in town. The school district saves $90,000 a year due to aggressive recycling and composting programs. Let's now continue our tour from downtown and see what's happening in the neighborhoods. We'll start in the San Roque area. There's a little-known project at the Cater Water Treatment Plant on San Roque that will have a big impact on your daily life. We will begin construction on a new advanced water treatment project that will help us meet federal drinking water standards. Once the new treatment process is in place, you'll likely enjoy better tasting water as a result. Onto the Riviera, construction is underway again at the El Encanto Hotel and will pick up in the summer months. The hotel is set to reopen by summer 2012. Just down the hill, the Cottage Hospital Workforce Housing Project, known as Via Riviera, is also getting started. They've demolished the former St. Francis Hospital site, and construction will be in full swing until the project is completed in fall of 2012. As we continue down the hill, you'll see throughout town, but particularly on the east side, we filled in sidewalks and installed over 100 new access ramps to help people of all abilities cross the street without harm. These sidewalk improvements, along with 80 pedestrian signal timers, were made possible with federal economic stimulus funding. Hopping over toward the Mesa, for anyone who likes to cut through Loma Alta to reach downtown or the beach will enjoy the safety of the new lighting and pedestrian improvements. And along Cliff Drive, the utility undergrounding project is almost finished. The large overhead utilities have disappeared and been replaced by new street lighting. This project should be completed later this spring. As also for this entire side of the city, we're starting the negotiation process for the trash hauling franchise on the west side. With our community's ambitious goals to raise landfill diversion beyond 70% and a multi-million-dollar contract at stake, the selection of a hauler in 2013 will be an important policy decision for the City Council. As you can see, many of our infrastructure improvements have been focused on your safety, whether that's in the form of flood control, better streets and sidewalks, or seismic improvements in significant public buildings. My colleagues and I stand united in agreement that public safety is a top priority. And of course, it takes more than buildings and sidewalks to create a safe community. And unfortunately, Santa Barbara is not isolated from the rest of the state when it comes to people who choose to conduct illegal and violent behavior, particularly when it relates to gang involvement. In fact, one of the biggest issues for our neighborhoods here in Santa Barbara and across the South Coast is youth gang violence. Law enforcement has estimated that there are hundreds of young people affiliated with or at risk of joining a gang. The City of Santa Barbara is serious in taking a lead to initiate several prevention and intervention strategies to steer them away from gang life. One-on-one case management connects kids and their parents to counseling, drug and alcohol treatment, job skill trainings, and other social services. To date, 164 youth have been part of regular case management through programs managed by the schools, Community Action Commission, and the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse. Many of these youth have demonstrated improvements in psychological and social issues that will reduce their risk of gang involvement. Participation continues to be strong in the city's after-school programs and with the Police Activities League. These are all good signs that we're making a difference. The combination of job training, mentorship, and after-school and summer programs will help kids make healthy choices and prevent them from joining gangs. Recently, the city was awarded $369,000 in state grant funding to help our partners, the Community Action Commission, All for One, and the Santa Barbara County Education Office to reach a common goal of ending youth violence. Each South Coast agency has also invested funds to launch a new framework to coordinate and focus the efforts of various programs in prevention, intervention, and enforcement. In this video, you'll learn what's ahead for the South Coast Task Force on Youth Gangs.
The South Coast Task Force on Youth Gangs is moving forward, strategically taking steps to help our youth make better choices and keep our community safe. The task force is building on the relationships and experience of the past 18 months and combining them with the leadership and direction of the Community Action Commission and a recently appointed coordinator. Growing up in East Los Angeles and eventually graduating with degrees from Harvard and USC, Dr. Gus Frias comes to Santa Barbara with a wealth of experience. He has dedicated himself to development programs that teach students how to replace self-destruction with a commitment to life and higher education.
There are a lot of lessons to be learned, and one of them has to do with the fact that it is easier for a youngster to join a gang than to get out of one. So the focus here is really prevention. And we have a lot of good prevention efforts that are out there that I hope to bring to our schools in particular.
The lessons learned since the task force began its work in 2009 will serve as the foundation as the program advances.
We're measuring everything we're doing, so and that was the goal from the onset. We're looking at academic progress. We're looking at the services that have been provided to the youth with case managers that are assigned. So we're able to look back at our data and see what's worked, what hasn't worked. We'll be able to use that in the future to see, what were some real positive aspects. When we started, 10% of the referrals that we received, and these were probationers, 10% of them were credit compliant at that time. That meant that 90% were credit deficient and severely credit deficient. So we've moved up in the last 15 months, and now 64% of them are now credit compliant.
One of the main goals is to assist to strengthen existing school community policing partnerships. And I believe that the best way is to go through the schools. The schools by law are required to have school safety teams that bring together law enforcement representatives, community-based organization representatives, along with educators, parents, and students. Our goal is to build on that existing strength and integrate gang prevention and education into them.
That momentum will be used to propel the South Coast Task Force on Youth Gangs into the future as they work to help at-risk youth.
In addressing gang challenges, there are three major strategies: prevention, intervention, and suppression. And there's no such thing as a standalone. The three need to come together and work to maximize each other's effectiveness. And my role is to facilitate this.
And I really believe with Dr. Frias, with his background and experience working nationwide, let alone just down in Los Angeles area, he's going to bring a real richness of some ideas and energy.
Dr. Frias is here. If you could please stand up so we all get to see you. There he is. And again, want to welcome you to Santa Barbara, and our community looks forward to a strong partnership with you. While our concerns have been elevated with recent gang attacks, the good news appears that to be a drop in the city's overall crime rate. According to crime statistics reported to the FBI each year, the total number of violent and property crimes, also known as Part 1 crimes, dropped by 8% last year. As you can see in this chart, these crimes are considerably lower than crime rates even 10 to 15 years ago. Still, even one violent gang attack is one too many. Our community deserves no less than the ability to safely walk in their neighborhoods, travel to and from our schools, parks, and businesses, and be free from intimidation from gangs. After considerable research and encouragement from the community, we have asked a Superior Court judge for the ability to use a new enforcement tool, a gang injunction, to send a strong message that we will not tolerate gang activity any longer. The use of a gang injunction can easily be misunderstood, and it's important to be clear about what's involved. This is a limited gang injunction that can basically be described as a restraining order that, if approved in court, will target 30 known gang members to deter them from future criminal activity, prohibit them from associating with each other, and prohibit them from loitering in certain areas of the city. It does not involve racial profiling. It does not blanket the entire city or group of people. These 30 individuals can also choose to opt out by renouncing gang life for good before a judge. By making better use of our legal toolbox, we can be more proactive about gang enforcement instead of reacting once a crime has occurred. Santa Barbara is already a safe city, and I hope you'll support me and the City Council as we take this next step to make our city even safer. For the last part of my tour, I want to show you how we're making it easier for you to get in and out of town. First, the 101 freeway improvements are on schedule to be completed next year. This project will improve traffic congestion, ramp access, and safety on Highway 101. Several project components are complete, including a roundabout at Coast Village Road and partial construction of the new southbound lane. Construction is underway in the Milpas Bridge to build a third northbound lane. And I want to particularly thank the residents and businesses in the Milpas area, and especially along Coast Village Road, for their patience during the construction period. If you prefer to travel by air instead, we'll soon have an airport with more amenities. This new airline terminal will be ready for a grand opening this summer. Your airport experience will be enhanced with restrooms after clearing security, my personal favorite, a centralized baggage claim, additional concessionaires while you wait for your flight, murals and public art throughout the terminal. The project also includes a newly configured short-term parking lot, a wider loop road with a separate lane for buses and shuttles, and additional loading space for you to get your bags ready at the front curb. Next year, the historic terminal will be relocated and refurbished with staff offices and historical displays. We end our tour back at City Hall. This is Santa Barbara's house, where residents voice their opinions and the City Council makes the policy decisions that result in all the work you've seen here this morning. It's truly an honor to be mayor of such an amazing city, both in terms of its physical beauty and the people who live, work, and play here. Residents and visitors alike have very high expectations about Santa Barbara, and they should. I know that city staff from all departments take great pride in their work, and I commend them for continuing to meet these expectations, especially in the midst of service cuts and salary concessions. You too have stepped up to assist the city and each other with your time, your expertise, your many opinions and feedback, and your dollars. There are still fiscal challenges ahead of us, to be sure. We cannot deny that fact. And yet, through careful planning, implementing hard budget cuts, investing in both our infrastructure and civic engagement, and coordinating our activities with many other stakeholders throughout the region, our city has a solid foundation to weather out this particular storm. And finally, we're accomplishing these tough tasks through vigorous public debates and passionate discussions, and doing so with respect and civility. The state of the city of Santa Barbara is strong, and with the many investments we are focusing on as a community, our city will become even stronger tomorrow. Thank you very much.